Thank you. I think this is a very important aspect of this particular workshop, because it really puts in perspective the things that we need to consider when we are choosing a career in academic medicine. And for the next 20 minutes, I'm hoping to cover these three main topics, right? The first and more important one is really finding your track. That's really what defines the rest of the decisions that you're going to make. And I'm going to mention the three most common ones, although I have to acknowledge that nowadays there are variations among these classic three ones that we have here. What are the resources that are needed based on your track? And then finally, promotion, how to get it within your own track. I'm going to finalize with some pearls of wisdom from people that have been before me, some of my mentors, and some from my own experience. So the three main tracks that are known within the academic medicine at this point are the classic clinician, the researcher, and the educator. But there are variations across the three main categories. I'm going to focus on the main one, but I'm going to mention some of the possible variations that you might consider when you're choosing a career in academic medicine. So let's first start with the clinician. This one is the classic clinician that takes care of patients. So most of the time is devoted to direct patient care. Usually it's not a PI, and funding is not expected or necessary, but depending on the arrangements that you have with your division chair, this might vary a little bit. Positives, and I think there are many positives for being a clinician in the clinician track in academic medicine. It's more intellectually stimulating than being in regular practice. And I don't have to persuade any of you that are here that, this is an interesting track and very much satisfying track within academic medicine. In fact, most of the research that is done by the clinical researchers or even the basic scientists depends on the work that is done by the clinicians. So the clinicians are really an integral part of the academic structure, and we value them highly. Not only they bring money, right? We know the RBUs and all that, but they really contribute to the development of knowledge, to the support of clinical research, to the support of translational research. So this should not be looked at down like some people think that if you're in academic medicine, you should be a basic scientist. This is actually an integral part, and I'm sure that some of the chief here will echo that because we really depend on excellent clinicians that are known for their knowledge and science. It's important also that within the academic medical center, the terms for calls are better than in private practice. The infrastructure is already there, so you show up with your stethoscope, and the endoscopy unit is running, and everything is running. You just bring your talent. And you could also be part of a program. So some of the classic things for the clinician within the academic medical center is that you could actually find a niche and be part of a program, like an IBD program or the liver program or the cancer prevention program or women gendered GI program and so forth and so on. So it can really be stimulating. Promotion for this track, it's pretty much tied up to the excellence and the reputation of that clinician in the community. So these individuals are usually busy. They have a practice that is very robust. They are usually outstanding teachers. Important for the promotion, it's not only the clinical responsibilities and the outcomes associated with the clinical care, but also how they are perceived. So the reputation of that individual within the community, nationally, regionally, it's important. Research is a bonus, not regularly, expected, but again, these are general rules. When we sign for, when we have a contract with the company, that needs to be specified. What is the amount of research participation that is required? At my university and at the Cancer Center, everyone, even the regular clinicians, they participate in research. They have different type of expectations, and they might not be the one that write the grant or the proposal, but we all participate in research. It's key to develop a niche. If you really want to be known as an excellent in this track, you need to choose. I know that there's the non-differentiated gastroenterologist, and that could work, especially if within that non-differentiated you choose something like outcomes or prevention or database mining and prediction models, things like that. It's still general GI, but within GI you have like a niche. So you can read the different tracks for defining your niche. How does it look? So we get the 3 years usually of training. most people nowadays in this track, they have an extra year, like an IBD year or a transplant hepatology or, a regular liver or GI oncology, anything like that, or endoscopy. Usually 20% of their time could be set aside for research. That varies according to the program that you're in and what you signed. And, opportunities for funding are also available, especially if you work as part of a team. I put there at the end, you end up with a gastroenterology paper, which, it's of course, we all want to be published. Even if you are in the clinician track, that should also be an expectation, either as a PI or, as a lead author or part of the team. How about the researcher? And here, I want to make sure that we are clear that it's not one size fits all. There are many division chairs here that, this is a great opportunity for, just look at the list of the faculty. There are a couple of, actually more than a couple. There are many chairs here. So it's a good opportunity to go one-on-one and ask about this particular track as well. So the researcher is expected to develop an independent research career. It's a PI of a project, publish or perish, and I think tomorrow we're going to hear about, the fact that we write all the time, right, Hashan? Yeah, all the time. And then there are many positive about this particular track. There is the concept of protection of research time, depending on which of the research tracks you are in. If you're a clinical researcher versus a basic or a translational, that percentage will change. Usually PhDs or people that are in the laboratory, they have about an 80-20, so 80% time in the laboratory, or if you're a population scientist, it's in your computer and in your dry lab. And then 20% clinical. If you are a clinical or a translational researcher, your distribution is going to be more similar to what John was mentioning, that you have like about a 50%, 40 to 50% taking care of patients. But the key here is that most of the patients that you see are part of your clinical research. So it's like a beautiful correlation. So even though it's, you're seeing patients for the purpose of the research question that you have. So you tie it up beautifully. Very flexible, and of course you really feel that you're contributing to the way that we practice medicine, and at least that's the hope of every investigator. Promotion for the researcher. It's pretty much tied up, and this is classic, nothing new that I'm coming up with here. Grants, manuscripts, reputation of excellence as well. Teachings, I put it in parentheses because depending on the institution that you're at, even though everybody participates in teaching, that's really not doesn't weight that much when you're in the researcher track. Clinical excellence is important for those that are in the clinical research or even the translational research. This is usually how it looks, right? We start with the regular GI training, adults or peds. There you follow up with, most likely, with a 2 to 3 year postdoctoral experience, usually division supported. It could be a grant, institutional grant. It could be something like a K award given to the institution. I know many of the big centers like Mayo Clinic, they have great K-12 programs, and I'm sure many of the institutions that are represented here have those programs. Those are less competitive than if you go outside and put it for a K by yourself, because they are given to the institution. The American Cancer Society have such grants, so they're given to the institutions and they allow for postdoctoral training. Then it's expected in that track that we write a career development grant. Some people do so well in their postdoctoral that they can actually jump, and I've seen it very few times, that they jump to become independent. In fact, last week I saw an announcement from the NIH Office of the Director that they have a track, it's called a D27, if I'm not mistaken, that basically are for investigators that after 3-4 years of the fellowship, or 2 or 3 years of postdoc, they're ready to jump into an R01 type. It's called D27. It's expected to have funding to support that time that it's not devoted to clinical service. How about the educator? Extremely important. These are the people that train the next generation of gastroenterologists. And, just as you train to become an investigator and you train to become a gastroenterologist, to become a fellowship or residency director, there's also opportunities for training and structured programs to really allow you to develop the skills that are required to be an educator. And we have in the audience several people that have beautiful careers as an educator, just like Susie Rose that is behind there. She is a dean, and she has demonstrated that being an educator in GI really requires training, perseverance, and you can actually change the way that we practice GI in the education arena. For this particular position, funding not necessarily. Research in education is a plus, and it could really help to advance your career. Positives, many positives. Still intellectually stimulating, you are the leader of the program, and as I mentioned, it's very important for the institution. If you feel that that makes you happy, and I think that was a little bit many people, when you choose your career, you have to make sure your track, you have to make sure that there is a fit between what makes you happy, what allows you to wake up in the morning and have a wonderful day, and what you choose, the track that you choose. If we choose incorrectly, everybody's going to be unhappy. You, your family, the institution, etc. And you end up not fulfilling the expectations. And that's a shame. Promotion for the educator. Leaderships. Typically, in addition to education, you need a second part, which is either clinical aspects or research. Teacher, I keep mentioning because that's really one of the premier characteristics of someone that chooses the education track. And again, research may or may not be expected, although I'm seeing more and more people in the educational track to actually start doing research in education processes, ways that we provide education, different algorithms, and actually research on that. So it's moving towards that end as well. This is the track. So you get 3 years of GI training. You might get a certificate from the AAMAC. You might consider doing a master training to help, in the education arena. Typically, the positions are fellowship program director or assistant internal medicine residency program, eventually all the way to deanship. And, typically papers on clinical publications or fellowship outcomes or residency outcomes are part of the portfolio. So here I summarize the 3 tracks again. So first you see the clinician. See the clinical effort is bigger for the clinician, so 80 to 90, but it varies across the institutions. Typically for the clinician, no external fundings, and the priorities are patients. Keeping in mind that they still, the clinicians are extremely important for being able to conduct clinical research and even translational research. Then you have the researcher, clinical varies depending on which type of research track you take, clinical versus basic versus translational. External funding is expected, papers and grants, and then the educator, about 50% or so in clinical care. External funding is not expected most of the time, and programmatics are the priorities for people in that track. So let's say that we know which track we want, or at least we have an idea of which really makes you more happy or you're more talented to pursue. Then we need to really focus. So I saw this a few years back, and I think that for many people here, we looking at the CVs of the 3 people that I'm going to be talking this afternoon, it is just unbelievable what you guys have done in such a short period of time. But it comes a time that when you're choosing and moving to the next level, that we narrow a little bit. It's not that we don't do, like plan A and maybe 2 different projects on the side, but they need to be lined up somehow. So focus cannot be, overemphasized. So depending on the track that you choose, clinical, research, or educator, your resources are going to be very different. And Barbara was mentioning before that, that goes in the process of negotiation. But we need to know what we need before we go and ask. And sometimes, and I see that, when people are just graduating or in the last years of fellowship, we still don't know. We like many things, you're good at many things. You could do endoscopy, you could, do some research, you like clinical trials. So getting the right mentor to help you choose and choose a track will really position you for success. If we don't choose the right track based on our desires, our talents, the place that you are working at, then it's going to be more difficult to be successful in that track because you're going to be measured by certain standards. And if you're not successful in that track, it doesn't mean that you're not good. It simply means that maybe you choose the wrong one, and then you didn't ask for the right things. I was reading the other day, and it said, I think it was Albert Einstein that said that, if you ask a frog to fly, he might think that he's stupid, right? Of course, so and I read, I said, I never thought about that, but it's true. So you need to be in the right track so that when you're measured, you will really be able to jump, right? If that's where the category that we're in. So for a clinician, access to patients, what is the clinical structure? What are the clinics? If I'm going to be working with, liver diseases, are the population of patients there? Who are the rest of the team? So forth and so on. If you're going to be needing endoscopy as part of your, your practice, what are the facilities, and so forth and so on. Usually, this track doesn't require as much startup funding, maybe administrative support, maybe a nurse practitioner or a coordinator for the clinic. Those are the things that need to be discussed with the program director. The resources for the researcher are the greatest one. Why? Because if you are in the basic science or you have a wet lab, those are the ones that require the most amount of money. So we're talking anywhere between 100 to 300, 500, depends. As the division chief, that's not my thing. I don't negotiate funding. But most groups know that. To hire a physician scientist is more expensive on that beginning than to hire a clinician, because I told the clinician, just bring your stethoscope. That's all you need, and your brain. The PhD or the MD PhD or that physician scientist, they bring their brain, the stethoscope, but they need all these other things that are not in place necessarily. However, leverage of resources within your institution is key. So if you need access to cores, facilities like genomic sequencing, mass spec facilities, or analysis, data analysis, just we need to leverage and find out if that university or that institution has those resources for you. For the clinical researcher, which I wanted to make the distinction between the basic, translational, and clinical. Here, the number one resource, it's really that famous protective time. I love the graph that Dr. Jenny showed, showing the percentage distribution, right? It was 167%, something like that. Yeah, of course. I mean, everybody in that track works 10 to 12 hours a day. So I hear you, and it's true. I'm not going to say it's not true. But when you're doing what you really love to do, then that becomes more of a, you really balance things out. And every week it's different. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the clinical investigator. So usually that protected time, 3 to 5 years when you negotiate. Be sure that this salary structure is agreed upon during that time. You might benefit from the resources from the CTSA or some of the other available resources institutionally. Basic researcher, I already mentioned the things that we need: space, equipment, supplies. Okay, so here's a summary of this part, and then I have pearls, and then I'm done. Look at the funding that is required. For a clinician, this is to start, right? The package is more or less. For a clinical researcher and for a basic researcher. This is negotiated upon, and many of these funds are really in kind or available through cores in the institution. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of resources, right? Maybe it's the CTSA, maybe it's some other investigator that has a core, but that adds up in dollars, right? Resources. Don't forget that we all need someone to help us with the administrative things, of course, making calls, getting, all this other support. And sometimes we don't ask for that, but we all have been burned for that. I finalize with the pearls. Pearl number 1, make sure that you know exactly what your goals, wishes, and priorities are, and strive every day to meet them. Every day, every week, every month at least, right? Not every day, it's difficult. Choose your area or niche and be the best you can at it. And as you do it, of course, try to identify ways where you really are valuable to that institution, that your talents, even though nobody is indispensable, we all know that, and our ego has to be in the right place. But if you develop certain skills, you will be a valuable member of your division. Pearl number 2, know what is expected from you, and that was mentioned already, and stay focused. Evaluate your progress and adapt and modify your plan. There's nothing wrong by, I do that every week. And then think about the resources that you need to be successful and make sure that you have it, and then there's a way that you have access to that. Identify and build a trusting and healthy relationship with your mentor. That will be talked separately, and it's a two-way street, right? It's not only one way. And then choose the right institutional environment. I cannot emphasize that enough. Don't expect to do something in an environment that doesn't have those resources, and vice versa. And with that, I finish. Thank you.